Welcome back to the Grow RDH podcast. My name is Katie and I'm your host today. Um, Following up on sort of what we talked about last week. So, last week, our podcast episode was about vulnerability and how we emotionally sort of internalize things at work and in our careers, and how we can sort of manage that. And I wanted to follow that episode up a little bit, talking about control. And so, control not only affects how we interact with our patients, but how we manage and maintain our work life balance. I know a lot of people talk about that so sort of vaguely: work life balance, work life balance. Yes, we want work life balance. But I think what we want more than just like having all these arms out trying to balance all these things is work life satisfaction, or career satisfaction. And so I think that talking about control today, so I'm going to title this, I can't decide. I was going to try to title it like releasing control and or shared decision making. So I haven't even decided yet. But the focus of today's episode is around control, and why control, or the feeling of being in control, is so important, and how we can sort of rework our day to day practice in an effort to really sort of release control while we still want control. And it's still important for us to obviously have control of our own lives and our own careers. When things happen that are out of our control, we need to be able to sort of react and move forward in a way that doesn't completely derail us. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is control and shared decision making. We talk a lot in dental, when it comes to shared decision making. We talk about that a lot in the patient perspective. So I want to start, excuse me, in that direction. And first, what I want to say is that stereotypes are not a good thing to, throw out there. But I will say that dental hygienists are definitely a breed of their own, if I may. And we didn't get to where we are because of specific things. And it's so interesting. We see tons of different students come through the program that I work at, and it is wild to see all the various different personalities, right? We all have different nuances and quirks, and we're all very different. But what I do see a trend in is dental hygienists' ability or desire to want to control their situation. And if you think about it, it really makes sense. Dental hygiene school is not easy. Dental hygiene school to get into is, at least for our program, is a very strenuous process. We take the best of the best. And I think that that lends itself well to really high performing students. And so for the academic or the career, the driven side of that, that's really great. We see that come out. And when we then get into practice, we sort of have this need to perform, and or we like things to be the way we want them to be, or the way we envision them ideally to be. And so while I won't say that all hygienists are type A, I don't want to say that, but I would be interested if there was research out there that sort of talked about trends and talked about personality types. I do my own little sort of fun projects in the school I work at, and we do some personality type stuff. And I do it for extra credit a lot of the times. I do it as a way for them to be able to get to the job interview phase and really have good a good grasp on some of their strengths. It's not, some of those personality tests are, they're just sort of there's no research behind them. They're just sort of for fun. But what I do think it does is, for students, it kind of gets them to be able to verbalize their strengths. And I really like that about those personality type quizzes and tests. And one of the ones we do is the four tendencies. So I don't know if you've heard of that. I will put the link to that in the description of this episode. But we do the four tendencies, and we very, very rarely have rebels. So the four types are the upholder, the questioner, the obliger, and the rebels. We very rarely have rebels, but there is usually one or two out of a class of anywhere from 32 to 40. But um, a lot of the times, the majority of them are questioners, which I think is great. That's what we need for dental hygiene. We need people that question why we do things. They're the critical thinkers, the ones that really want to understand why things are done the way they are. Um, and of course, I am an upholder, which means you take both inner motivation and outer motivation and you try to balance everything. And sometimes it works and sometimes you fail miserably. Um, but many of the students are questioners, which I think was awesome. We also do the Enneagram, which is kind of fun. But again, lots of trends that I see. This is not research based, but in the trends of class after class that have come through, tons of type twos, which is the helper, and a lot of nines, which is the peacemaker, which I love that too. I don't even want to admit what I am. I am a type 8, which is, if you know anything about the Enneagram, probably explains a lot about me. But um, it's just fun. And again, the reason I do it is because it just helps them sort of verbalize and dig a little bit deeper into some self-awareness and talking about strengths. What are my personal strengths? And if the quizzes sort of help them get to that, it's really what it's for. All that to say, that was a really long-winded discussion about personality tests, to say that many times the motivations behind the reasons that we do what we do, or we get into conflicts that we do, is because we like to have control. And again, I don't want to stereotype. All hygienists do not act or, you know, interact with people the same way. It just tends to be a trend. And having control makes us feel stable, right? Control is stability to a lot of people. It is to me. And again, a lot of this is speaking just from personal experience. And so when I have control, I feel stable. I feel like I know what to expect, and knowing what to expect is really important. We talked about that when we talked about patients that were upset, right? Unmet expectations is the number one reason that patients get upset with us and go write bad reviews on Yelp. And so, um, having control gives us stability and it gives us expectations. And so we can plan and prepare of how we're going to interact in a situation. And so when things happen that we don't want to happen or we don't anticipate happening, that can cause some distress or it can cause some issues with patients. And like I said before, we're going to kind of talk about this in two different aspects. The first aspect is in the patient aspect, and this ties a little bit to our trend here on ethics. And this is related specifically to patient autonomy, because one of my favorite things, I guess, about teaching is that you really see things come and go, and you kind of see how the trends ebb and flow. And when I went to school, 2009, everything was about the stages of change. So your pre-contemplation, contemplation, and so on and so forth. And you move up the chain. And that was sort of the behavior change styles that we were taught. And that's how we planned our patient ed and all of that stuff. And now that I'm teaching perio, now we're really focusing on training the students and talking to patients using motivational interviewing. And oh my goodness, what I just absolutely love motivational interviewing. It is the best patient relationship builder that I have used or seen done. And it was interesting because I also work in a corrections facility. And so at the corrections facility, we were learning motivational interviewing skills in order to de escalate issues with offenders. And so I was just starting to learn that, and then pretty soon, right at school, at the hygiene school, then we're like, okay, we're going to go into motivation interviewing here, and so I was learning from both aspects, and I was like, wow, this is really important for conflict management. It's really important for relationship building, and it's also really important for behavior change. And the the basic premise behind motivational interviewing is shared decision making, right? We are experts in dental care and perio and hygiene related stuff. And we are experts in what we're trained in. Some of us have expertise in radiology. Some of them have expertise in lasers. And we know what we know, and we feel really confident in that information. But we are not experts in the patient. And that's what motivational interviewing allows us to do. It allows us to get to know our patients and learn what makes them tick, what makes them choose the things that they're choosing. Why are they making those decisions? Um, and that is essential to shared decision making for a patient. So they do have autonomy, and they have to have autonomy in order to have informed consent, which was a couple episodes ago. So motivational interviewing is essential to this conversation because it helps us release control. It is not our job to be such a good teacher that we're going to convince this patient that this is absolutely what we need to do. We are going to figure out what is important to the patient and why they are making those decisions, and what the underlying reasons behind the things that they're choosing. A lot of the times, I mean, I just have to mention this because this is my absolute favorite, one of my absolute favorite learning tools, or I guess experiences that I do. And I still, this is sort of embarrassing, but there is a video on YouTube, and I can't remember, I think it's called Empathy, but it's by the Cleveland Clinic, and it is an advertisement, and it follows around. So it's walking through a hospital, and there's no words or like audio. It's just music. It's like instrumental music, and it's following these patients. And like somebody gets in the elevator, and they're like going to take somebody off life support, and then somebody else enters the elevator, and they're found out they're just going to be a dad or something. But you don't hear any of that. It's just like you're seeing what's going on in their mind, essentially, is how it's sort of it's how it's designed to look. And it's still, I you could watch it to this day. I could turn it on right now and I would start tearing up because you have absolutely no idea what a patient is dealing with. You have no idea what they're going through that day. And if we treated everybody the way that we would treat them if we did know, then I think it would make our interactions with patients very different. And none of us ever would intentionally go in to just make someone's day bad. And that's not really what I'm saying here. But I think when we get into the grind of our daily practice, and we're we have so many things to think about. We have the risk mitigation, which we've been talking about. We have to dot our I's, cross our T's. We have to make sure our notes are done. We have to keep up with infection control. We have to do our notes at the end of the day. We have 1,000 different things in our mind. And sometimes I think when we get into that grind, we sort of forget that. That this becomes, I don't know if any of you have felt this way, but sometimes you just feel like a robot. Like I'm going through the same motions, I'm doing the same things. And you sort of lose a little bit of that humanity behind the patient in the chair. And do we do it intentionally? No. But does it happen? Yes. And so going back to that video is you see sort of what's going on in their head or what they're dealing with. And it says, like, if you knew what was going on, basically, would you treat them the same way that you treat them? And it's just it's a very moving video. I promise you, again, I will link that as well. There's gonna be a lot of links in this description here. But I will link that. But I really do, I recommend it to everybody. I have the incoming freshmen watch it, I have the seniors watch it, I have everybody watch it because it's so moving. And that is essentially to me what motivational interviewing does for anybody that uses it. You have the opportunity using motivational interviewing to learn those things about the patient in a very relationship building type of way, a relationship building communication that really sparks them to do most of the talking. And that's why I love it, because they're doing most of the talking. They're telling you about themselves in a way that you are going to learn what motivates them. And that goes a long way to help you provide them with the best answers, I guess. You're helping them come to the best conclusions. Maybe that's a better way to put it. But it's so interesting, having the seeing the students do this. They'll do it a couple times and it just feels really awkward and weird. And then you'll hear that I've had students come to me like after a clinic session that I'm not even in, and they'll just come to me that next day and they'll be like, "Oh my goodness, like I actually did it. I used it with a patient and it came natural." And that's just a really rewarding feeling for me to hear them experience the difference in that type of communication versus like, I'm the expert, you're the patient, I'm going to teach you. It's, I'm a healthcare provider, you're a person. How can we work together? That to me, that is shared decision making. So, um, that is how it's going to help you in your patient interactions. You're going to be able to give them the control. And we're going to probably get into motivational interviewing as a whole topic on its own at a very later date. Um, Not that I have all these really planned out in general, but I have kind of a couple different ideas that I sort of want to go in themes here. And motivational interviewing will come later. But all I will say right now is that relinquishing control and understanding that the patient is the expert in the patient's life and that all you're there to do is to help them be the best that they want to be, or help them make the decisions that are best for them. That's really your job, is how to get them to the best decision for them and not for you. And that is where it gets a little bit like, oh, but I know that this isn't good for them. Or a lot of the examples we use when we're doing this in role play scenarios for students is smoking. Smoking is a really big one that, right away, that first year you're taught, how awful smoking is for the periodontium. But then we get into a little bit deeper issues like mental illness and substance abuse disorder and people quitting hard drugs. And maybe that tobacco is the last thing that they've really had to give up or they don't want to give up. And they're willing to come into your practice. They're willing to sort of work on their oral health. But right now, tobacco is not something that they're willing to get rid of. And so, learning empathy, or learning that while you as a provider may know that that is not a good decision to continue that, coming from a place of humanity and saying like, okay, I understand why this patient is in this scenario. How do I work with this patient to maintain the relationship, to build trust, to show empathy? And maybe it's a behavior change that maybe it's not 6 months from now, maybe it's not a year from now, but I support them and I support this decision. It's not that we have some patients, I'm sure you guys do too, that there's a note in the chart, do not talk about smoking, because they've had some bad experiences with healthcare providers and dental providers talking about those things, and those experiences are negative. So they've completely shut down and they don't want to talk about it. And to me, that's worse than maybe working with them and empath- being empathetic and being understanding, and just continuing the relationship no matter what it is that they are struggling with or choosing to do. So yeah, so that's the patient side, I guess, and that was really a lot longer than I anticipated talking about that. But another just aspect of this is what it feels like to give up control at work. And I'm going to talk a little bit now, like we're sort of flipping roles. Now we're in the role of an employee employer situation. And what does shared decision making look like for that part of it, right? So now we're kind of in the opposite end. We're on the part where we maybe aren't quite as, we're not in a position of authority. We're in a position of a person under a rule or a law or authority, right? And so that helps us understand a little bit more from the patient side as well. But it is important that when we're talking about work life balance or work life satisfaction, I prefer work life satisfaction. So I'll be interested when I put this out if I get any feedback, how you guys like to word that. I know there's a lot of different ways that people like to say that. I like work life satisfaction to me because I don't want to be a balance. I want parts of my life, I want, the parts of my life to be, I want to be satisfied. And sometimes that means work takes priority. And sometimes that means my home life takes priority. And I don't want to be like having to juggle everything. I just want to be able to sort of um, be able to have it all. If I have to come home and do some grading and I've made a rule, well, I don't do any homework on these days or whatever, then I just am going to have a bunch of guilt because I'm like, oh, I have mom guilt. I had to do grading tonight. So I guess that's why I'm trying to word it that way. It's work life satisfaction because I'm trying to maintain some sort of sanity here. But um, what that looks like in an employer situation can make a difference for how well you are satisfied at work. And if you want more control or you want more shared decision making, I think it's really important to talk about decision making when it comes to conflict, right? So if we're having some sort of conflict, a lot of the times it's because we feel like we don't have control. And if you think about your daily schedule. I know because I am an upholder or I like to have control of things, even when I have a patient like completely go out of my schedule or a patient come 20-minute late, that really bothers me. I have a hard time with that. And relinquishing that and understanding that there's really not a whole lot I can do about it. Yeah, it sounds great, but it's easier said than done. And so as you experience those things, you sort of build up ways that you can manage that lack of control. And maybe it's something that you work in with your office. Like if a patient cancels, these are the things that you can do, or these are the patients you can call to fill your schedule. So all of those things are important. Another thing that I find when we're talking about control at work is shared decision making when it comes to some of the bigger decisions. I think it's so important that we are able to be assertive enough to advocate for ourselves. And a lot of the times we're not used to being in positions that we want to do that. I was listening to another podcast, which I listen to a lot of podcasts, but this was not about dental at all. It was actually a finance podcast, and it was talking about it's called Poker Power. And so it was a program that was teaching young girls, and I know not all hygienists are female, but specifically this program was focusing on females, young females, adolescent, teenage, and teaching them how to play poker. And the reason behind this program was to help them build negotiation tactics and confidence. And I found that so interesting because I am not a poker player. I never learned how to play poker. But if you think about how successful people win at poker, is how to sort of be confident or take risks even when they might not have something like to take a risk on, right? So you sort of are like bluffing your hand. And I found it so interesting. So I thought that was a really unique way to look at how to build negotiation tactics or skills. Um, and so with shared decision making, I think it's really important for us as hygienists to go into the employer setting or the work setting, even with coworkers. It doesn't even have to be your boss, but to go into those settings with some sort of confidence in negotiations. And if you want to say, if you want to voice or you want a seat at the table, it's really important that you know what you want to say and have the words to say it. And so when we're talking about then control, it's like, what do you have control over? And if you kind of take an inventory of what the conflict is, you can sort of look at the whole issue, and you can, even if it doesn't even go anywhere, say your negotiations fall flat and you didn't get anything you wanted, um, you still have the ability to look at your surroundings or look at the situation as a whole and ask yourself, what specific things in the scenario that I don't like, what do I have control over? What can I change, or what can I move to take back a little of that control? What can I focus on so that way I'm not out here trying to be overstimulated and about things that I really have no control over, but they bother me? Focus on the things that you do have control over. And so if it's an employment situation, maybe it's focus your time or put your energy into the things you can control. That way, when the situations happen that you can't control or that you really don't control, you're not so focused or invested on those specific things. Now, when it comes to like pay or some pretty serious benefits or something like that, yes, those really do matter. But your approach to them, or how you negotiate, or how you come to the table, how prepared you are, how what kind of options you offer. Typically, your option is probably not going to be the option that's chosen. So, what do you have for alternatives? And we talk about that like in conflict management courses and stuff. And so, I plan to talk a little bit about those things on future episodes. But um, coming to the table very prepared is something you can control, even though you can't control the outcome. So that is today's episode. I'm going to wrap this up. I feel like I could probably talk longer about the second topic, which we didn't get super into, but I'm getting up close to that 30-minute mark. And I want to keep these short and sweet. And if anything, it's just going to give me more ideas for future episodes. But I do have to, so as I was doing this, I kind of forgot that I had these pictures up. So I am a mother. I have 3 little kiddos, and Violet wanted me to hang these on my desk. So I don't know. I think these are monsters. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see these, or if you're seeing my reels. Um, and then this is a picture of me. That's me. And then those are the 3 kids. So she made those. She's like, Mom, you have to hang them up on your desk. And I said, absolutely, I do. So, okay, well, it is the end. We're going to wrap this up. And again, I'll go further into detail on some of these topics on future episodes. But thank you for spending the time with me. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe if you found this valuable. Share with a friend. And I will see you on the next episode. Bye.